Dear all present, we are beginning the joint press conference of the Latvian and Lithuanian Ministers of Foreign Affairs. It's going to take place in Latvian and English, and interpretation is provided. And the press conference is being broadcast on the social networks of the MFA of Latvia. And the word goes to the Minister Baiba Braže. Hello. I'm truly glad to welcome today here in Latvia one of our closest friends, the Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kęstutis Budrys. And we have met several times, but this is our first bilateral visit. We have been to Brussels together for meetings in Europe, and his whole government was in Ukraine. And this is the first bilateral visit. There's a lot to talk about. He met the president, the prime minister, people from the parliament, so the program was very dense. Our relations are excellent between our countries, and the best ones we could have between partners, between neighbors, business partners. So everything is taking place between us. And in this sense, I think the common interests in the Euro-Atlantic region, and including relationship with America, which have to be strengthened, NATO working in the EU with the Lithuanian presidency approaching, UN questions, energy cooperation, so-called hybrid threats, where there's not a lot of hybrid, they're actually quite specific threats. So a whole program of consultations, discussions. So thank you for your visit, and we will continue working together. Thank you, Madam Minister, and the floor goes to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania.
Dear Baiba, dear friends, thank you for a warm welcome here in Riga, in Latvia, as you mentioned. Yes, it's my first bilateral visit as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We went with the whole government to Ukraine, but as the Minister, that's my first destination. And it's my real honor to continue our bilateral cooperation from my new position. From my career of a couple of decades in the security sector, where I cherished the very good relations in the security field. I know Baiba from her previous positions, from NATO times, from the defense and security policy cooperation. Now we are continuing in a new situation, actually, that we have to adapt to, and from the new position. And this new situation has provided us from a main adversary and from main source of the threats in the region, from Russia with the new activities here, and what we've seen last year with the non-conventional operations on land against our monuments starting, then against different business and other facilities. Now it's continuing to the sea. And we have to cooperate closer within the Baltics, looking for the solutions and also showing the leadership for the others how we should solve it. And that was one of the topics that we already discussed. There are many measures that we can use within NATO, regionally, and EU level, and we will do this. Of course, we talked about Ukraine and our support to Ukraine. Baltics are the show examples of how the support has to be increased, what the amount of it has to be, and that it is an especially important element long-term. So our commitment to long-term support in security and defense field for Ukraine, that is something for others to follow. Not to look for the shortcuts and fast solutions, but to continue doing in what we do. Support Ukraine and put more sanctions on Russia. Sanctions was also touched in our bilateral discussion today, and how we should cooperate further, more in different formats, included EU, in expanding what we already sanctioned, and also going into the depths of how we enforce sanctions, because there are still loopholes and still chances for the ones who want to circumvent sanctions. So we will work on it also closer. What concerns our defense and security cooperation, once again, Baltics are the one that can show the example to the others, and that will be also something to prove to also new US administration that we're serious about our defense. Baltic countries are the ones that spend more to defense than US does right now. Of course, not absolutely numbers, but when we're talking about the percentage of GDP, Lithuania this year will reach almost 4%, and we're looking forward what we can build, what capabilities we can build, and become stronger in this sense and provide more security to our people and also to our businesses. So the defense spending will be one of the issues of the Hague summit that we will cooperate in preparing for. And also it is the chance for me to congratulate Latvia on Latvian achievements, and I heard that you won the Golden Globe Award for the film Flow. I haven't seen it yet, but I will do. But congratulations with this one. And then thank you very much for your, once again, for your warm receiving of me. Paldies.
Had I known you haven't seen it, I would have taken you to a film.
Yes.
Paldies, ministriem, laiks, mēdī.
Thank you, dear ministers. Now, media questions. Please state your name and the media you represent, and who are you asking the questions to? And please speak into the microphone as well.
Čia matyti, aš kalbu lietuviškai, bet užduosiu klausimą latviškai, nes toksai yra formatas. Ministras pateica, ka Lietuva jau...
So the minister said that Lithuania has already provided 4% of GDP for defense. So are you discussing that you could actually raise it, as Trump says, to 5%? Because our president has stated that we will raise it to 4%. So that's a question to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania.
And actually, we approached, and just stepping back a bit and answering to how we reached, decided to reach 4%. So we started from the question: what capabilities Lithuania has to have, and at what time frame, and in which year. So we have ambition to have our own national division in 2030, and that would be fully operational and war-fighting capable. And for that, we counted what we have to get, what we have to develop in Lithuania. And then the number was big one, and to reach that one, we have to all agree that we have to increase because of the capabilities. It's not about the percentage. And we started from 2% in the beginning of 2022, then we reached 2.5, then we reached 3.2 in 24, now we will be 3.85 or almost 4 this year in 25. This is how we approach our defense, what we can build from it. If it is the number 5%, it doesn't scare us. But the question is, in what time frame we will do it, and how many countries, how many of us will do it. It's not about the Baltics building the iron wall or something big here. It's about all the alliance, and that's why this call to increase defense spending is really important for allies to do the same. Because if we will increase to 5% and there will be still someone not reaching 2%, it won't make us stronger. Yes, it will show that we are committed, but as the alliance, we have to do more. So this discussion on the NATO capabilities and targets, what we as a NATO should provide, knowing that regional plans require a lot, that's a big topic, and we have to continue with this. And the upcoming new US administration is a big and good stimulator for that discussion.
We all have a similar approach within NATO, but there's a defense planning process in NATO, which is based on the NATO defense plan. So it indicates to each country what is necessary to reach these capacities to defend, to deter. And within these capabilities, these capacities, there are these units which are indicated for each country which is necessary, and then this defense spending is applied accordingly in what time frame. So that happens in Lithuania, in Latvia, and other countries. And we wish that all the NATO members will be as serious in this question as well. I have a question from Juris Kaja.
The Spanish global news agency, EFI.
And one of the and the father of one of the winners of the Golden Globe.
The father of the producer of the Flow thing, yeah. So, you know, I'm an unknown compared to him. Anyway, all eyes are on the incoming Trump administration, and the incoming Trump administration has already done something that could be considered a hostile act against a fellow NATO country, that is to lay claim to Greenland and to not rule out the use of military force to acquire Greenland. And he has also talked about, this would be to our minister here, that annexing our main ally in the NATO operations here in Latvia, Canada. Will you support some kind of joint NATO or European Union position to point out to the incoming American president that maybe this is not the way things are done?
Listen, hypothetical ideas, controversies and questions is not something that Latvia's foreign minister will go into commenting. I know that our Danish colleagues, Canadian colleagues, they have made their points and they are there, and again, hypothetical exercises are hypothetical exercises.
Yep. You know, we are allies, and it's talking about all the countries that you mentioned. We are allies, and what we do as the allies, we talk. And then we discuss, and then we do not fight each other, and yes, we have disagreements, and then we close the door and we talk, then we talk publicly, and this is how it works. And on our side, we have, you know, we had also different situations with our, you know, allies or partners elsewhere, and if we have an argument, we go there and argue and you know, and show the case. So in this time, if there would be hypothetically the discussion like this, we have a lot of, you know, to share in common, you know, talking about the security of High North, talking about the security of North Atlantic, talking about the threats that some of the countries, you know, is a source of, and I'm sure that when we would talk about the security and defense, there will be much more in common that we have to defend collectively than we have to, to disagree about. So that would be, also in other situations. And yes, we are looking for the new administration, and they will be in a position, and there will be other things, I think, on the priority lists on our joint agenda. And one of those would be how to preserve the international world order, and how to preserve the international law to be respected in many, many areas. And this is where we have to cooperate, and we will cooperate more.
Paldies, mums ir vēl jautājumi.
Thank you. We have more questions. Alexandrs Velčers.
Press agency DPA.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Skaļāk lūdzu varētu?
So, no. Yes, Alexander Welcher from the German press agency DPA. I have a question. The Lithuanian minister, you mentioned the non-conventional threats on sea. Next week there will be a summit taking place in Helsinki of the Baltic Sea countries, and on which also participating the German Chancellor and the NATO Secretary General. I would have a question on both of you. What are the outcomes we can expect, and what are you expecting as an outcome of this summit, and especially looking at the participation of the German Chancellor? What are you awaiting from the German side? What are you expecting from the German side? What Germany can be done, what Germany should done from your perspective? Thank you.
I would say there are several layers of issues that you have raised. One, as I mentioned, the hybrid threats, so-called hybrid threats, actually are not so hybrid. They are pretty visible, whether that is, sabotage acts, whether those in Berlin, there were killings, so there are various activities that are happening. Even cyber attacks, they are not just hypothetical attacks. They are concrete decisions, actions by individuals. So, and very clearly, just a response is not sufficient. What is needed is very high level of situational awareness. So the closest collaboration within the countries among security services, with the private sector, civil society, journalists, researchers, and so on and so forth. It's literally understanding in a due time, being ready and understanding what is happening. And the same among the allies, especially among the allies in this case, if we speak about critical undersea infrastructure among the allies around the Baltic Sea. With Sweden and Finland joining NATO, of course, that has greatly increased. So the intelligence cooperation, the knowledge and understanding, if we speak about, again, the undersea threats, the undersea infrastructure and protection. So understanding what are we talking about? What cables are we talking about? What ships are we talking about? Indicators, very clear understanding who can be in the risk zone. Second element is deterrence, and that deterrence can be military, non-military, posture, there is a variety of measures that our civilian military actors can use. And third is indeed, when necessary, punishment, attribution, and everything around that. So there, I would say, the three packaging. Of course, on top of that, we also have to understand that international law needs to develop, because there are conventions. There is the Convention on the Law of the Sea. There is a tribunal. Nothing has been tested. Nothing has been sort of tried around these type of situations. So probably that is another venue that needs to be advanced in our joint work, both within the region, but also within NATO and other forums. But there are concrete decisions with regard to the ships, you would have heard also, so that's what we would expect also from Germany. Internal resilience, internal understanding. Germany has quite a number of security services internally, so very close collaboration, information sharing within Germany with allies, and posture, deterrence, and going after perpetrators.
Continuing on the whole situation, of course, we have to see it in a broader process of escalating from Russia's side. So that's what it was. And of course, it's related to our support to Ukraine. It's related to overall Russia's stance against the West as they understand it. And our lack of response, and we have to have this clear linkage between lack of response to previous situations where we're getting now, and lack of reaction to what was happening already in continental Europe and elsewhere with the kinetic sabotage operations from Russian institutions and their agents. We saw it in the military framework that was within the military threats, so now they're escalating further into the sea. And we have to take it as it is. So yes, this awareness has to be not only about the facts, but about the context and about whom we are seeing on the other side. And seeing our vulnerability is also very clear. So what has to be done is just better understand what's happening in the Baltic Sea. And it's not the only shadow fleet that is the instrument here, but also the capabilities that Russia developed for decades to disrupt the critical infrastructure under the sea and elsewhere. So they have this capability, and they will use it when it will be needed. When it will be needed, they will decide, because till now they have this still political initiative and escalation initiative on their side. So we have to have the instruments to see what's going on in the Baltic Sea, even if it is the very shallow sea, but we still do not know each capabilities that are moving around. It's not only about the underwater, it's also about the civilian ships that are used for covering intelligence activities, for collecting intelligence of the coastal countries. So first thing, recognizing and controlling what is happening in the sea. The other thing is, of course, recognizes what's going on with the civilian fleet and the shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. That's the main gateway to the world for Russia's oil exports still. There are hundreds of ships leaving the Baltic Sea that are not safe, not secure for the environment and for our critical infrastructure. And be it lack of the insurance, being lack of the competence of the crew, or being, other intentions behind it, with the state actors behind it. This is a big instrument and big source of our insecurity. So what we have to do, we have to sanction more of those ships, and we have to control more what is happening in the Baltic Sea. So it has to be a topic. So what we are doing about it, because they're going into the Baltic Sea and leaving the Baltic Sea through the straits that are within the NATO territory, talking about the Danish straits and the others. Whether international regulation and our coastal regulation allow it, we have to assess, and that's another topic. Whether it is enough or not for the future regulation, we have to be very open and about it. If it limits ourselves in reaction, we have to amend it. That's how we should approach, because we cannot be only adapting and seeing what's new from the Russia's side is served towards us. So that would be, also part of it, because the Baltic Sea is a very specific one. It's really shallow, and that's the sea where you can disrupt with the anchor, and you cannot do it, somewhere in the blue water, somewhere in the ocean. That's in the Baltic Sea that you can do, and that's the Baltic Sea that is surrounded by the NATO countries that Russia see as the enemy of their intents to review the whole European security structure. And then, finally, our reaction and response. So reaction, we will see already tomorrow from the NATO, bigger presence here in the Baltic Sea. It has to be done also in the future to show that we have steel on the water, we have the instruments to counter it, but not only to counter, but we have to show that we have the measures to respond, and not symmetrically. We are not the country like Russia, we will not disrupt and cut the connections, but we have to show that its interests can be also vulnerable to our joint activities. And if we won't do this time, if we won't provide the options also publicly to Russia's side, it will continue. It will escalate further. So now we are dealing with the critical infrastructure underwater, so tomorrow we will deal with something else if we won't stop with our concrete response measures.
I think a good example would be when there was a sabotage act here. There was an attack against the Occupation Museum when a sort of explosive was thrown into it. Our security service was able to identify perpetrators within a few hours, I think within 24, 36 hours, and actually takes them in within another day, because they had very good awareness and understanding on the overall situation. And I think there are areas where that is more difficult, like in cyber, it always takes much longer time to identify the perpetrators. But again, it is possible. And as more we share, as more we understand with each other on what is happening, as better it is. And especially with the private sector, because many of these cables are actually managed and owned, and data is private, belongs to private companies. So NATO established within its maritime command already in 2023 a special unit on critical undersea infrastructure protection to establish that safe space of exchange of data between the interagencies, private and public sectors, to make sure that these risk profiles, whether those are ships or other entities, civilian, shadow, and so on and so forth, actually are sort of analyzed and known. So we encourage countries and companies to share that information with our NATO Maritime Command.
Mums ir viens vēl iespēja.
We have an opportunity for the last question. Gins Amoliņš, Latvian Television.
Latvian Public Television, LTV. A quick question, perhaps more to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, about your neighbor Belarus. A comment on that. There's elections coming up this month, or so-called elections. There's also news that for the municipalities within 100 kilometers of Astravets power plant, there's again redistribution of iodide pills. So the level of threat from Belarus, has it changed? And how recently, how do you assess that to Lithuania? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Actually, there will be no elections in Belarus in January or anywhere in the future that we can foresee. This charade or reappointment event that will happen on 26th of January, it will be nothing familiar to elections, because the corrupt regime, they are just showing to the world how they can punish everyone or anyone who is against their will, and that is the very trend that started much before 2020, after the last rigged elections, and of course we won't recognize anything that is there, and the very instrumental use of Belarus by Russia, that is also obvious trend in the recent years. With Belarus assistance to aggression against Ukraine. Belarusian soil was used for the forces to move in. Belarusians' air space was used to attack the critical infrastructure and other objects in Ukraine and targets. So Belarus was in line with what Russia did and still doing. And I'm not even talking about the provision of the military equipment and weaponry. So Belarus, it will be also accountable together with the Russian decision makers and political and military leadership for what is happening right now, what they're doing, in all the ways against humanity in Ukraine. So the source of threat is obvious to Lithuania and to other neighbors. And not only neighbors, with the announcement of deployment of medium-range nuclear capabilities, dual-use and also nuclear-capable long-range fires. That changes a bit the overall threatening posture of Russia in Belarus. And also remembering the announcements about the deployment of tactical nuclear weapon already last year. So, of course, it is now the platform to threaten the neighbors, and especially those that are in support, as Lithuania and Latvia, of democratic movement of Belarus that supports the idea of free Belarus. And from these geopolitical and strategic threats, we can go down to the very practical part, as we both countries saw already and still see the threat of illegal migration or the weaponizing of migration, down to the activities of Belarusian KGB against the Belarusian opposition in our country. So there is a full spectrum of the threats, and part of those are instruments of Russia. So we have to continue countering them, of course, strengthening ourselves, building the wall, building the procedures, and bringing more sanctions. So what concerns Belarus, we have to increase the tariffs for their for import from Russia and Belarus. We have to also expand the sanctions what concerns different sectors that were still left uncovered, and we will have the very chance to talk about it at the end of January, just the very next day of this charade that will happen in Belarus. That on 27th during the Foreign Affairs Council meeting in Belarus, in Brussels.
Yes. Yes, drīkstu no savas.
If I may respond in Latvian, yes. The Belarusian election cannot be considered an election. It's a ritual that is already predetermined with a predetermined outcome. So any illusions that anything might change in terms of how this regime reacts or comports itself against other countries, neighboring countries, there will be no change. Nothing will change, and we will continue supporting the democratic movement of Belarus. Thank you to ministers, thank you, and the press conference is closed. Goodbye.